Today's workforce is shifting. Now, for years, there's been reports about the older generations leaving the workforce in the amount that the younger generation simply could not catch up with. And what I mean by that is more people were leaving and retiring the workforce than there were replacements for them. Now, a lot of this has been sped up by the pandemic itself, but this isn't really the only shift. You know, Today we'll talk about just kind of four quick things, and that is, I mean, we could dig into so many different things, but let's just kind of focus on four. Number one is the generational shift, and number two is what's some of the employee expectations for this new shift, and then what's some of the expectations for the employer, and then also what about the evolution of the employee within an organization. So when we're talking about generational shifts, here's some stats from a recent catalyst.org report. Millennials account for about a third of the U.S. labor force. Millennials and Gen Zers at 38 and then 48% identify as a race other than non-Hispanic white. Gen Z is officially entering the workforce. In fact, Gen Z is actually predicted to be majority non-white by 2026. So we know that the generational shift, the demographic is shifting to an older demographic there. In fact, about 1 in 5 U.S. employees will be at retirement age by 2030. So a lot of this is going to change, but it's not just about race or age. I'm sure you guys saw in December, where about 156,000 women lost their jobs in December. And that's a difference of the 16,000 men that lost their job in December. So while diversity, equity, and inclusion is becoming a big topic now, the pay equity is also coming in there. It's not just, it's it's a social topic that is really gaining a lot of ground, a lot of conversations. You have all these things within the age and the race and the gender kind of coming into play now and shifting quite rapidly. You also have the gig economy, which is coming into play now. So you have contracts, you have 1099s, you have, special talent, so forth, that is coming in, non-W-2 employees that's coming to shift things up as well. Now, all these things are important to leaders, and really it's good for them to understand why the different makeup of their demographics within their, work structures at their work. And really, it's good enough because they have different roles. They have not just different roles, but they have different priorities and goals. Not just the race or the gender or whatever, but, let's just take financial planning for a good instance, right? So if I look at the financial planning of the different generations, all generations are focused on different things, right? For instance, all generations are really looking to build an emergency fund, except for Gen Z. Overall, all the generations, millennials really are most concerned about building enough equity to put down a down payment for a home. Maybe not right now because the market's crazy, but they're looking to pay out, they're looking to buy a home, but they're also looking to pay off their student loans. That's different than all the other generations, right? That all the generations said that they're planning up for a vacation is a priority. Again, except for Gen Z, they want to buy a nice shiny high ticket product or item. So it might also not surprise you that Gen Z, about 39% compared to about 53%, actually didn't really have a financial plan pre-COVID. And so again, all these things are just one aspect. This is just the financial piece of it, but all these things are different goals and metrics that the employees within different generations kind of value. And it's important for leaders to know and understand this, so then they could not just take a cookie cutter approach to all their employees. So how does all this generational shifts really affect the shifting in the employee expectations in the workforce? Well, for one, flexibility. It's not just the location, whether it be work from home, or in an unfinished basement like I'm currently living in right now. It's a work in progress. But also, even more importantly rated is that it's time. You see, a lot of people just don't really value where I live or where I work, whether in an office, remote, or at home, but it's time. You see, let's talk about location first, then we'll come back to time. You see, as we transition to work from home, actually rather seamlessly, I would say, for a large portion of America, employees have had to adjust. But it's not just the employees that have had to shift. It's been a major restructuring and administrative challenges internally. HR has gone through hoops to figure out, how do I pay these people with their taxes now that they moved to a different state? You see, what we saw was a lot of companies became multi-state, in some cases overnight. Why would I live in New York City where the taxes are high and the expenses are high when I could do the same job, in theory, in North Dakota? It's much greener. I got more room and I can go outside and work off my Wi-Fi on a porch looking out over a beautiful sight versus, in a city, if that's what they want, right? And so because of this, single state companies became very quickly multi-state companies. And a lot of this was a really push by the employees, to find that flexibility. But really what it did is it caused a headache and a nightmare for a lot of administrative and logistical challenges. And so that takes care of the location. But what about the time? As more of us are, working from home like I am right now, we find ourselves kind of torn between that whole work-life balance, which I'd argue doesn't really exist. For instance, I got some boys that are going to school right now, and one gets on the bus at 7:45, the other one at 8:15. They come home at 12:15 and 12:45, and for the most part, my wife takes care of that, and she's awesome, and so my in-laws help out. But a couple times a week, I'd like to drop them off and pick them up. That's a benefit to me. That's something that I really value, that time. And while this is just anecdotal, employees do have some data on their side. According to Gartner's Reimagine HR survey this year, they found that 36% of high performers in their respective industries, actually did not work a standard 40-hour work week. In fact, companies that really embraced and supported a kind of a flexible work schedule found themselves to 55% more likely to have high performers in their market. So while it is not just a nice to have, from a business standpoint, maybe it's the right thing to do, because there's value and there's research showing that a lot of employees will perform better if they don't work the standard 9 to 5. So now that employers are embracing a little more flexibility for their location and their time for their employees, what else is expected from them? Well, frankly, a lot. Business owners and employers are expected to monitor the P&L. They're expected to turn a profit. But today, they're actually expected to support the entire employee life experience. Going back to Gartner's Reimagine HR survey, employers that supported the employee life experience saw an increase in mental and physical health by 23 and 17%. Respectively. And additionally, employees that truly focused on the entire life experience saw an overall increase of 23% of numbers in regards to their high performers compared to those who don't. Now, all this, when the employee is kind of fully engaged in the life experience, both their personal and their professional lives, as we've seen today, really kind of become intertwined. And so now the expectation for employers isn't just to monitor the P&L. It's not just to provide a safe environment for their employees to work, but the expectation from the employees placed upon the business owners is to really engage in social aspects. So in a recent National Law Review article, it states that today there is a growing desire among employees, particularly young workers, to work for companies whose values align with their own. Surveys have shown that employees that are much more likely to be highly engaged at work if they believe their employers are working toward a greater good, and that workers expect companies to take stands on issues that impact the public good, including environment, equal justice, immigration, and constitutional rights. Now, again, data backs this up. In a separate Gartner study, 74% of employees expect their employer to become more actively involved in cultural debates today. And the result is that the data shows they're right. Employees that were considered highly engaged increased from 40 to 60%. So we have a shift in demographics. We have a shift in employee and employer expectations. Now, how does this really affect the evolution of the employee? Well, in Deloitte's Human Capital Study of 2021, it points out that organizations that can afford workers the agency and choice to explore passion areas will be able and more quickly and effectively activate workers around emerging business priorities than organizations that take a prescriptive approach to filling skill needs. There's actually two key points here, right? And first, there's a need to upskill and reskill their current employees, right? As HBR points out, that there's a 33% increase in job-related skills from 2020 to 2017. They don't expect you just to turn the widget. They expect you to turn the widget and actually manufacture and change the machines that you turn that widget on. They're doing so many different things that now the requirements to even get into a job has grown by a third. Employees are expected to be more versatile and agile in their new and current roles. And this also is shifting the focus from renting talent to fill specific skill gaps. Again, this is the rise of the gig economy, the contractor economy, right? This is where, maybe it takes too much time and it's maybe too high for that total labor load to bring on a new W-2 employee. Well, I could just grab a contractor to do this job for me for a month until I can get that new hire trained and fully going, where the case may be, right? Or maybe I just want to have them just kind of in the back pocket, right? Just whenever I need to fix my HVAC unit or whatever it may be, you have them available, right? And the second point here is that this evolution is that there's what Deloitte calls super teams, this rising thing that they call super teams. So super teams can give organizations the opportunity to re-architect work in more human ways, leveraging technology to elevate teams' ability to learn, create, and perform in new ways to achieve better outcomes. See, the idea here is that in efforts to kick the traditional model of the, siloed and departmentalized work, what they do is they kind of bring a team together, employees, right? They bring some subject matter experts to really revamp, and kind of re-engage, the organization. For instance, if you're looking to tackle projects and initiatives, let's say, again, go back to the widget manufacturing, I would actually bring a widget, production supervisor in there, right? Now, I'd bring in the HR, I'd bring in the CFO, I'd bring the CIO, and we'd all kind of come together and devise a plan, utilizing the spin, utilizing the employee time allotment, utilizing technology and subject matter experts on the operations side to really get buy-in from all departments in all directions. And now we have a game plan, a super team of how we're going to make this process more efficient, more productive. So we talked about generational shifts. We talked about the shifts in the employer and the employee expectations. And we've also talked about the evolution of the employee. Now, of course, we could have spent an hour on each topic, but I think this has gone on long enough. But so I'll just leave you with this one last little nugget, right? So the nucleus of all this, right? The driving force behind all this is really two things. It's executive buy-in and HR. Going back to Deloitte, perhaps even more powerfully, respondents who express confidence in HR also experience more positive outcomes. And this is good news. And, looking at this chart right here, confidence in HR to accurately and effectively affect change has risen. Going back to Deloitte one last time here, COVID-19 has earned many organizations the right to be bolder in orchestrating work throughout the enterprise. To seize this opportunity, HR needs to reorient its mission and mindset towards shaping future success by taking the lead in re-architecting work and reimagining the workforce and workplace accordingly. So I'll leave you with this right here. Whatever 2021 has in store for us, and hopefully it's not like 2020, and whatever challenges may come, be that agent of change in your workplace needs. Be that agent of change that is willing to step up and look at different avenues of approach to really tackle on this workforce change, right? And as always, best wishes, be awesome, take care.